In case you don't know, Governor Chris Christie got into some trouble. Did he or did he not know about pressure that his office put on the George Washington Bridge? I'm trying to remember that. Do we have a similar case here in Colorado? It all started with a story that this man broke. Todd Shepherd from CompleteColorado.com. Glad to have you.
Glad to be here, John.
All right. You have become the king of asking odd questions to maybe not this guy, but the guy who works for that guy's assistant who works for this guy. And you decided to put in a open records request, which really started this ball going that turned into a national story. I want to get into this. What is it you wanted to know, and who did you request information from? Just to start us off.
It was November 13th when the president went before the country and said, essentially, there was this wave of bad news about insurance cancellations. And the president said, if you have been canceled, we're going to try to work something out so that you can keep that plan.
I mean, those plans that if we liked, we could keep, that nobody was going to get rid of our, no one was going to touch our plans.
Those
if you
plans.
Your plan, you can keep your plan.
Yes.
That plan.
And at the beginning of November, there was just this wave of bad news. It seemed like every day, either a state or an insurance company was announcing just massive numbers of cancellations. So it was November 13th, I believe, when the president goes before the country and says, we're going to find a fix to this. And I thought, this has really got to be tumultuous for insurance companies and for insurance regulators. Now, of course, I can't use the Open Records Act to go dig through the emails of insurance companies, but I can do that for the Division of Insurance. And
which is a state office. This is not a federal office. This is a state office.
This is a state office.
What are they in charge of?
They regulate, if you have certain premium increases, they regulate it to make sure it's warranted. I believe they also investigate claims of insurance fraud and those sorts of things.
So they keep an eye. Who's got insurance policies? All that other good stuff.
Exactly. Trends in insurance, and they monitor fraud and that sort of thing, I believe. So what I thought I would find would be an honest or a genuine moment from an insurance company telling the Division of Insurance, you know what, you guys have got to knock this off. We can't be jerked around. You can't change the rules on us every other day. And I thought that'd be interesting.
You gave us years to get ready to make sure for this Obamacare, and that's why we had all those cancellations. And now you're trying to say, oh, no, you can have them back. Well, no, we changed everything. Those don't even exist anymore. So you were looking for the pushback potentially from insurance companies, but you found something else.
Right. What we found here was Senator Udall's office communicating with the Division of Insurance, and they said, we've been talking to the insurance companies, and there were these cancellations, but so many of them also offered renewals at the same time. If you're offered a renewal, according to Senator Udall's office, that's not really, we don't see that technically as a cancellation. And so we'd like, in essence, they didn't say we'd like you to revise your number downward, but they sort of gave that gist.
All right. Here in Colorado, 250,000 people had their plan canceled. The plan that if you liked this plan, you can keep this plan. 250,000 people in this state, and these were just individual plans. Coming up this year, when it comes to group plans, who knows what it's going to be. Right. This is not good for a guy who's running for re-election, who was the 50th vote to pass Obamacare. So I could understand that if you're working for Senator Udall, the last thing you want is, publicly seeing 250,000 cancellations when Udall himself put forward, echoed the lie of Obama, you can keep the plan. And he said it a couple times. It was in a letter he gave. He said you could do it. And well, that's not good for him. So I can understand his office want to say, let's not call those cancellations, because while you took away A, we offered you B, and you could have that.
Right. I think if there's a singular lesson from this story that's developed, and it's developed in different ways since then, but it really does show that if this sort of fiasco with the rollout of Obamacare were happening in the first year or second year of a 6-year term by Mark Udall, there probably wouldn't be that much concern. These emails really gave us insight to how worried he is that this single issue may cost him re-election.
I started talking about Governor Chris Christie because did he know, what did he know, when did he know it? It was his staff that pressured the lane closures on the bridge. And now there's some talk whether he knew it or not. But when that came out, he did a 2-hour mea culpa. He went out and apologized. He addressed it, and he fired the guy. Udall's, by contrast, instead of saying, pressuring these state workers to refigure their numbers or to publish their numbers by different criteria, we don't do that. That's unacceptable. Instead, he took a different tact, which really surprised me. He doubled down.
Well, they did double down, and they said what we were trying to do was, there was a lot of anxiety over that initial figure of 250,000, and we were just trying to get the right information out there. And that's what they've maintained from the start. What's clear, though, when you read all of the emails, a lot of times there's been this talk about they were trying to get them to change their numbers. Certainly what they did want was they wanted cancellation defined in a term that in the way that they were seeing a cancellation, right? So if it's canceled plus a renewal offer, it's not a cancel. But the other thing is they didn't want to be out there by themselves. Now that's ultimately what they did. They did go to the Denver Post and they said, look, we dispute that these are cancellations. And really that's fine. I mean, if a senator's office wants to go to a news outlet like that and say, we sort of dispute the definition of this term.
That's not what they did.
That's not what they did before they. Right. That's not what they did before they went to the Denver Post.
They pressured state employees to do this. And when you have somebody from the senator's office, and who was it from the senator's office?
It was his deputy chief of staff, Joe Britton.
All right. So putting pressure on state employees, and you talked to some of these employees, didn't you?
No, well, I had a phone conversation, but it was off the record, and it was immaterial to the story, actually.
Okay. All right. So great story. It takes off, gets front page of the Post. Before you know it, it's a national story because anything Obamacare and anything that whiffs a little bit of what Chris Christie did also becomes a national story. And the way Udall handled it, I thought was quick. In other words, it was defensive. It was, hey, no, instead of, well, let me explain this and I'm sorry. All right. I thought that was the end of the story. There it is, done. It wasn't the end of the story because there was questions. An ethics council or an ethics group got together to review what happened. And so several weeks later, an ethics committee met and looked at all the evidence and came out with a pronouncement that Udall's office did nothing improper. There was no undue influence, there was no intimidation, there was no, and you were wrong. In fact, the Twitter world went crazy that, you see that false story that Todd Shepherd put out. You see, there was no intimidation. There was no outside pressure on these state employees. And that's what the ethics investigation showed. Well, shame on you.
First of all, it wasn't as though there is some independent ethics body that is just waiting around to be called upon like a bullpen. And hey, come on in and do an investigation now. Essentially, DORA, or the Division of Regulatory Agencies, which is the parent agency of the Division of Insurance, DORA just assembled their own group of people to do their investigation. What happened is then another outlet, the Colorado Observer, which is an online outlet, they went back and said, can we see any evidence, or can you give us all of your documents pertaining to the investigation? And DORA essentially said, we don't have any.
Stop there, because this is important. So this other online news source, and I think the Denver Post did the same thing, said, we're using the same Freedom of Information Act. You have to show us the documents that you used during this ethics investigation. And the department
that were produced.
Right. And the Department of Regulatory Agencies that put together the ethics panel said, they're none.
Right.
What? I've seen government offices. There's always a paper trail. There is always an agenda. There is always something. There has to be. What do you mean there's none?
And this, I think, is really an interesting question because your point is the way governments operate, and bureaucracies in particular. A solid 10 to 15% of what they do is creating a paper trail of the work they've done so that they can prove it to their supervisor, to the General Assembly, or to the public later down the road. These offices don't have a birthday party without so much as carbon copying 50 different employees on an email. They really don't. I'm serious about this. I've seen long email threads about which electric stapler the Department of Transportation should buy. I'm not kidding. So there are paper trails for buying an electric stapler. There was no paper trail for this inquiry as to whether there was intimidation.
At least they let everybody know who made up this ethics panel.
And
right?
that's what they did not do. This is where it really got interesting. They initially said, we won't tell anyone the names of the people on the panel. Then those names appeared on a report by Eli Stokols on Fox 31. This is where Twitter makes it really interesting, because we're not used to getting the real-time thoughts of reporters as they're working on stories. This report by Stokols comes out and says, here are the people that were on the panel. Immediately, the Denver Post said, wow, they leaked the names to Fox.
To our competition.
To our competition.
So this is the government, not a campaign, not a private individual.
Great point.
Not somebody slimy like me, but this was a government saying, hey, Eli, and Eli does a great job, and he's connected. Here are those names that everybody's screaming for, and he reports those names, and the Denver Post rightfully loses their stuff because you don't do that. If you're going to do it, you tell everybody. So what did they end up doing at DORA, the Department of Regulatory Agencies?
Well, I think they realized what an incredible mistake they had made, and so they immediately gave the names to the Post as well. The Post essentially tried to put it to bed. I don't want to say that. The Post sort of put it to bed the next day and said, see, it wasn't that hard. You gave us the names. I frankly still think the fact that there's no paper trail deserves a little bit more investigation. We'll see whether or not that happens, but it's still a mystery that one was not produced.
The head of DORA, I'm blanking out on her
Barbara
name.
Kelly.
Barbara Kelly, when talking about this ethics panel, was very specific that this ethics panel was objective and, what was the term?
Neutral, I believe.
Neutral, that's it, objective and neutral panel. So I'm assuming that an objective and neutral panel had people who were truly neutral and objective. But we find out it was only a 3-member panel, and those 3 members are?
They're all Democrats, and they all work inside the Department of Regulatory Agencies or the Division of Insurance. I think Barbara Kelly really could have set herself up nicely if she would have asked for the panel to be composed from a different agency inside state government altogether. I know that would have taken time away from those people and their work.
That's what happens in county governments. If there's an issue inside the county government, that DA will keep his hands off of it and go to the neighboring DA and say, can you investigate this? Barbara Kelly didn't do that, and so you have on the committee Barbara Kelly, who is an appointee of Hickenlooper, her second in command, and then a legislative liaison who used to be the chief of staff for the Senate Democrats. This is the objective and neutral. I mean, I don't care how you want to play the partisanship game. There's no way with a straight face you can say that's objective and neutral.
Well, and also she said, we don't want to give these names because they'll be slandered out in the blogosphere. Now, this is the same agency that when they were asked, was there intimidation by the Udall staff, they said, hey, we're adults and we wear our big boy girls and our big boy pants and we can take that sort of stuff. Then they said, we can't take what the blogosphere does.
Todd, thank you. By the way, the website, Complete Colorado, an incredible aggregator. Go check it out. Check out the Independence Institute. That's independenceinstitute.org. Listen for me on KHOW Radio. Tell a friend, and we'll see you next week.